Greetings, Colorado. I'd like to make the following statement for your consideration. There's no way that Dan Maes is going to be successful in his bid to be nominated as the Republican Gubernatorial Candidate for 2010. Now, why on earth would I say that? It seems like he's put in a lot of work, right? He's put how many thousands of miles on his car, and he's opened an office in downtown Denver. He's reasonably articulate. He's a businessman. He seems to understand the things that he's about. But if you take a look at the recent caucus, and you compare that caucus to the straw polls that have been conducted over the last several months, you'll find there's a significant difference. The caucus puts Dan Maes in the 30s, the 30% plus range, with Scott McInnis at over 60+% of the total vote, with the other potential nominees being less than 1%. And if you compare that to the straw polls conducted not long ago, Dan Maes was eking ahead in the straw polls. So why the difference? Some would argue that, well, maybe perhaps it's because it's the diehard Republicans that go to the caucus and they're the ones that really support Scott McInnis. But I'd like to suggest to you that if you look at what Republicans have accomplished and the people they have put in leadership, especially in the last 20 years, you will find that Republicans are unwilling to put true conservatives into positions of leadership. Now, why is that? Well, for some reason they think that they have to cast such a large tent that they can't be truly conservative anymore. Of course, you won't hear any of them say that, but if you look at the policy positions and the actual actions that they carry out, for example, George Bush expanding the size of the federal government far more than Bill Clinton ever did. In fact, Bill Clinton looks more conservative than George W. Bush. That's kind of odd, don't you think? Especially since Bush is supposedly conservative. That's just an example. How about on abortion? Scott McInnis is pro-choice. Dan Maes, he's mostly conservative on that issue. He has some wiggle room, if you will, that I'm not comfortable with as a pro-life candidate myself. But there's no question that Dan Maes is more conservative, at least on abortion, than Scott McInnis is. How about taxes? Scott McInnis is pro-tax. He's as democratic as anybody else when it comes to taxes. He claims to be pro-business, but his policy positions on taxes sure aren't conservative. And if you look at Dan Maes, I would say he's probably not as liberal or freewheeling, if you will, on the tax issue. Colorado, did you know that Scott McInnis is the one who carried the water on the legislation here in the state of Colorado to move petitions out from being an issue of an opponent reviewing those signatures to being the Secretary of State? So in essence, what Scott McInnis did is he put the government in a position where the government now opposes any petition, good or bad, regardless of what it looks like. So now the government is in opposition to the people of the state of Colorado. And that, my friends, is the direct result of Scott McInnis's actions. Scott McInnis is not conservative. He is essentially a liberal in conservative clothing. You might even use the phrase rhino, Republican in name only. So why would I suggest that Dan Maes can't beat Scott McInnis? Because the Republican Party and the Republican Party elite back in Washington don't want Dan Maes to win. Dan Maes is not liberal enough for the Republicans to vote him in. So as you're watching the race for who becomes the Republican nominee for the governor of the state of Colorado, consider these thoughts. Is the Republican Party really conservative? I submit to you it is not. it's time to make a change. Vote American Constitution Party when you go to the polls in November. When you look at that ballot in November, vote Big Ben for governor. Give me the opportunity to stand up and say to the Republicans and the Democrats, enough is enough. It's time to pay attention. It's time that the Constitution had meaning over and above lip service.